Well, I gotta say, the reason my Deathly Hallows review is so late is actually due to a couple circumstances. One, the theater I initially saw it in was absolutely horrendous. To the point, I mean, there were bag diggers, there was people literally swearing at you to move over a seat when you didn't need to. And, I mean, just like if the theater turned off the lights, the sound wasn't turned up high enough. To the point where, honestly, one of the few times, not that I did, but you would consider walking out of the theater. And I'm not usually the one to do that. Usually what I think of myself is, I have paid for this movie, regardless of whether I like it or not, I have paid for this experience. And I mean, unless the movie literally comes in and punches me in the balls, then frankly, I don't know why someone would leave a movie. I mean, other than an emergency, of course. Or something good really spontaneously comes up and the movie's terrible. But again, these circumstances are very limited. So at any rate, I stuck through the movie. It's one of the few times I really thought I would have walked out, because it was just awful. As such, it kind of hindered my enjoyment of the movie a little. I decided to go watch the movie a second time, not only because, you know, it's Harry Potter, it's the last one. I've liked the series, and I really want to leave on a better note. But also, so I can get a better impression of the movie itself, because, to be frank, I was a little disappointed the first time I saw it, and I'll get into that in just a second. Second time I went, thankfully, the theater was much better. Now, to start off with the actual review here, do I bother doing plot synopsis at this point? Honestly, I mean, it's the 8th movie. You know what's going on, and you don't know what's going on at this point. It's really just the second half of the Deathly Hallows plot that was started in the 7th movie, and this, I think, really is what this entire review hinges on. This Deathly Hallows 2 can really only be judged as a part of Deathly Hallows Part 1. I know that seems kind of funny to say, considering the fact they were called Part 1 and Part 2, but when I was going into this, I didn't expect it to be so reliant on the character introductions and plot elements, of course, but the character introductions and the finale, being both parts, really needs to be viewed in the light of both films as one together, because, well, here's my problem. My problem still with Deathly Hallows Part 2 is that I don't think there's enough smaller character moments. And we do get a few small character moments, but some characters are completely ignored in certain portions, again, taken apart from Deathly Hallows Part 1. And even sometimes put together, there's some characters that really just go by too fast, particularly large characters, and they have big scenes and not even really focused on. And that's not necessarily a problem, because I understand it's a huge cast and you got to cut someone out. But at the same time, I can't help but feeling like for a finale to an 8-part series that's made so much money and means so much to so many people, that they would extend the length a little. This movie is only like 10 minutes, or 2 hours and 10 minutes long, or 2 hours and 15 minutes long, at very most. And frankly, I thought it could have stood to be a little longer, for a couple of reasons. Mainly, again, smaller character moments to really make you feel, and also more emphasis on the battle scenes, because while we got was great, the trailers definitely do some poor job of marketing it in that light. Not really representative of the film itself. A lot of what you see is kind of the battle scenes, to be honest. And like I said, what you get is great, but at the same time, it just doesn't seem like there's enough of it. And I think the real crux of this movie, outside of it being a two-parter, is that it just doesn't build that kind of sense of finality that I think it should. Mainly because while I understand what David Yates, the director, was going for here, he wanted to keep it personal, and rightfully so, through the perspective of Harry and Co.'s eyes. I just can't help but feeling like it could have been a lot more. I know the word epic is really overused, and I use it myself in conversation, but I mean in the literal sense here, I think it really could have been a much larger scope. And while it was really cool to see Professor McGonagall do something again, because she's been out of it for a while, and it was nice to see a lot of the smaller characters introduced, Particularly, again, I don't remember his name, honestly, because he's really not that important of a character in the movies, and at this point I'm going from the knowledge of the movies. Another thing, I have not read the books past 3, so I'm judging solely from a cinematic perspective, taking into account, of course, that it is an adaptation, but, as it were. But yeah, and it was really nice to see a lot more Voldemort in this one. Voldemort... Man, I'll get into that in a minute, but so I have to say, I think the story was it was climactic, and I like the actual plot of it. I don't understand why a lot of people, because I heard a lot of hate coming out of the movie, and when the book came out, that the story was terrible, and maybe the book has the same problems of the movie, which doesn't linger on enough character moments. Maybe not. I don't know if it's the same thing or not, but suffice to say, I really enjoyed the story. I like this idea of the Horcruxes, and I like the eventual maturity of the series. I like the earlier innocent entries, and I like the darker later entries. But yeah, I feel just a little deflated reviewing this, to be perfectly honest. I really like the idea of a lot of the plot. It's a little confusing at times, unnecessarily so, I think, particularly involving the usage of the Deathly Hallows, and kind of the idea of wand ownership is a little muddled, which is unfortunate because it kind of... That's what the final battle kind of hinges on, more or less. And while I like where all the plot went, I just didn't think it emphasized it enough. But thankfully, the movie is saved by some really good characters. And I say saved like it was a disaster, and that's just truly not the case. I want to specify before I go on even any further that while Deathly Hallows Part 2 did not quite live up to my expectations, I did enjoy it, and the second time I saw it, I enjoyed it more than the first time, almost by necessity, you'd think, after such a terrible experience, but I saw what a lot of its positives were, and it was nice to see it, because I didn't rewatch Deathly Hallows Part 1 immediately prior to watching Deathly Hallows Part 2 the first time, and while I have a very good memory and remembered most of it, there were still a lot of little moments that really helped me piece it together a little better, and particularly, again, I forgot to mention this earlier. I mentioned it, but I didn't elaborate, is that Deathly Hallows Part 2 relies on character moments. Relies on it. For instance, I thought Part 2, and I still think Part 2, cheaps out on Hagrid a little. I know Hagrid isn't like a really important character to the plot, but Hagrid was a really important character in the earlier part of the story. And honestly, I've grown really fond of Hagrid more than I have many of the other characters in the universe here. And I would have really liked to see more done with him. But if you watch Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2 as part of the same movie, then he is featured at least semi-prominently in Part 1. He has a good bit there. At the same time, what can I say, right? I mean, he really wasn't a whole lot in Part 2. So especially in Part 2 by itself, he doesn't get his bow. But put together, it's still kind of iffy, I think. And they could have brought back other characters, I think, and other things that they didn't. But that is, again, I keep getting sidetracked here, and things that I want to talk about. There's a lot to talk about this movie. It's a big event movie, you know, it's once in a lifetime kind of thing. But, well, maybe not once in a lifetime. But, regardless, I really liked how they brought back a lot of things from the earlier movies. Like I won't spoil it, but they brought back a lot of rooms and not only just people, but like rooms and portions of Hogwarts that you hadn't seen for quite a while. And I also really liked how, whereas I loved in Deathly Hallows how it was dead serious, and pretty much any of the magic of the earlier movies was just a faint whisper in the background, very much represented by the title screen with the kind of just faint whisper of the main theme going along and scratching metal. And any truly magical moments in Deathly Hallows Part 1 was reserved to the Three Brothers tale, of course, something else like that. Just very, very short moments. And I like that. I like the tone, but getting into too much of my review of that, suffice to say, Deathly Hallows Part 2 eschews that a little. And I think that was a good idea. Again, I just don't think, with the length of the movie, it really played out enough of what it could have. There's a lot of darkness, a lot of people die, but at the same time, it brings back a little bit of sense of humor and magic, and I think that's appropriate to close the series out on. And yet, at the same time, when everything is said and done in the movie, there isn't that triumphant blast of victory. And I understand that's probably realistic, but I think that would have fit more in the tone with you were going for in Part 1. rather than part 2, because again, part 2 does seem a little more playful, if it was, as it were, like some of the earlier films. But let me get into the characters. Holy God, I've been talking 10 minutes. Suffice to say, acting is great all around. I honestly, Harry is probably the least of the 3 actors in the cast, but at the same time, I think Daniel Radcliffe did a great job. Rupert Grint as Ron, fantastic. I love Ron. I've made no qualms about it. He's a great character. Hermione's actor, again, solid job, good job. So the really standout one here, I mean, there's all these stalwarts that are coming back. They play their roles just as well as they did prior. McGonagall is perfect. Hagrid is perfect. All these people are so perfectly cast. Maybe that's just, you've lived with them for so long, but they all do great jobs. There's really nary a poor acting job to be found. The only thing that I will say is that I think that Voldemort, he gets so much more to do in this movie, and wow, he is just like so over the top and crazy, and honestly, I loved it. I mean, it's not the sneering villain that he has been, kind of, but honestly, Ralph Fiennes just has so much fun playing him, you cannot help but laugh. Voldemort's like dancing around, shooting people, and he gets all like, rah, evil. And honestly, like, he just blows everything out of proportion. He really makes it seem like, he is a much more... He's a lot more than he actually is, because Voldemort's really not that much of a character per se. He's very simple motivations, and you don't really know him. But in this movie, you see a lot of him, and every moment he's on screen, it's just awesome. His little reactions, his little like I'm getting weakened moments, it just And then there's the hug. Everyone knows what I'm talking about if you see in the movie. That's just, again, perfect example of such. One other thing I wanted to mention about the story, too. I know, but I'm almost done anyway, so just let me go back to it. There's a lot of things on Snape in this movie. I really appreciated that. He's been kind of tossed out of the last couple movies, and I thought he was a really fantastic character. It's a little bit underutilized, but at the same time, they bring him back here for good measure, and definitely have really great moments, plot twists in the movie with him and Dumbledore and Harry. And really changes the way you think about a lot of the series, to be frank, and I enjoyed that. I particularly like, again, how he's featured more in this movie. But then, it's the last movie, right? So, but again, that's a really great moment of the plot. That's actually my favorite moment of the movie, that sequence in general. And I don't want to say anything, because it's a major spoiler. But if I say it, definitely look forward to it. And, you know what? That's really what I want to say with this movie. Like, watch it with part 1 and go in with the appropriate expectations that it's not going to be like a 3-hour huge fantasy epic. Then you'll probably enjoy it. I don't think it lives up to necessarily the best entries in the series, but which for me is Azkaban, Half-Blood Prince, and Deathly Hallows Part 1. But at the same time, it's still a great movie. It's one of those cases where you say to yourself, yeah, I don't know, I was a little disappointing, but then you think to yourself, yeah, but it was still better than like 90% of whatever else I see in theaters. There's still a lot of great moments in it. You should just see it. The music here was definitely triumphant. I didn't like it quite as much as I did in part 1, but definitely another fantastic scoring job. The effects were really good in this. From what all the big battle scenes were, they were portrayed really nicely. Harry Potter movies have huge production values anyway. You really can't argue too much. It's well produced, if nothing else, even if you hate all the movies. So yeah, in conclusion, definitely go see Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows Part 2. If you haven't seen them up to this point, I mean, there's no point starting. You won't understand shit. It doesn't even make any sense. They're going to reference things that you just won't get at this point. But if you do have a firm knowledge of the previous entries in mind and take Part 1 and Part 2 as a singular movie, almost back-to-back if you can, then Deathly Hallows Part 2 is pretty enjoyable. It's a good conclusion, just sadly not a great conclusion. Anyway, guys, till next time.